Welcome everybody to our webinar on emergency marketing for accountants and tax advisors at this curious time we are living through. So before I introduce myself and indeed Kim, and just a little bit of housekeeping. So we're going to aim to keep to an hour or thereabouts. Kim will be presenting on a few things. I will be presenting on a few things. We will be taking your questions. Do fire in questions using the question box as we go along. If they're really relevant, I'll take them as we go along. Otherwise, we'll be taking questions at the end. So fire away as soon as something occurs to you. What I'd say at the moment is that this platform we're using, GoToWebinar, it's always been very robust in the past. I've been using it for a very long while, but in recent days with everyone working from home, we've had a few technical difficulties with it. So if it all crashes, fear ye not. Hold on a bit and we'll try and get things up and running. Either way, we're doing a recording and we'll get something for you. But if there is a crash or other technical problems, do bear with us. It's a sign of the times. Afterwards, you will be getting a recording, both in video and podcast version. You'll be getting some resources, some extra information as well. So, what we will be covering, Kim will be kicking off in a minute. We're talking about the core foundations for tactics, and the core foundation of tactics is a really good strategy. So that is what Kim will be covering, at least as far as you're able to cover this sort of subject in the time available. We'll be talking about the importance of knowing your prospective client, not just having some vague idea that it's some SME owner in the 30 miles of your office, but really knowing them and the importance of this and the value this does in terms of making your campaign successful. You'll have heard about the 5 Ps of marketing theory. Well, I'll be talking about the 3 Ps of successful accountancy marketing tactics. We'll be dealing with your questions. We'll be dealing with the pitfalls. It's very common in accountancy marketing that cause it to fail, and how you'll be able to overcome these things, particularly by following some of the things we recommend. I'd highlight that this webinar is particularly aimed at partners in smaller multi-partner practices. We have people from firms of all sizes. We also have some very experienced marketeers on the webinar as well. I'm sure there will be something for you within this that will be very valuable, but please do remember who it is aimed at. To introduce myself for those people joining us who don't know me, my name is Tim Priseman. Very nice to meet you. I am director with Kelso Consulting. We're an award-winning firm of reputation builders. I've been working either for or with accountants for more years than I'm going to admit, on both thought leadership, public relations, reputation building, social media, and all sorts of other things. I'm author of the book Thought Leadership Manual. I've won various awards in that area, but that's all for another time. For those people who don't know Kelso Consulting, we do all the sorts of services you'd expect a impactful public relations agency to provide, and maybe also the sorts of services you wouldn't expect from us as well. We're particularly strong in helping firms create high impact thought leadership, and we do a lot actually within LinkedIn, and we'll be talking a lot about LinkedIn later on within the tactics, albeit do bear in mind this is not a how to do it, what buttons to press type webinar. This is about equipping you with the tools to be able to be successful. Okay, enough about me, and I'd like to pass over to my co-presenter, the esteemed Kim Tasso. Let me just work out how to pass the presentation over to you, Kim, and hopefully Your screen will
Okay.
show momentarily.
Bear with me, we're nearly there. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Happy St. George's Day to those of you who are celebrating. I really only have about 15 minutes to talk about a very big subject, which is marketing strategy. So yes, it will be in a nutshell, and B, I will have to speak very quickly indeed. I'd like to say hi and good afternoon to those of my clients who are joining us this afternoon, and some colleagues and friends, and even my own firm of accountants who are down the road in Twickenham. So good afternoon, guys. As Tim said, we've got some very experienced marketers with us today, so hopefully you can add in some other thoughts and comments and questions for the question session later on. I won't do a big introduction. I'm a psychologist by training. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. My work most recently is with the owners and partners of practices and with the boards on growth and other change strategies. And as Tim said, I've written a few books, editing the 7th one at the moment, and nice to have some time to do so. And I work almost exclusively with professional services firms. These are some of the larger firms I've worked with in accountancy and law and property. And interestingly, we're facing some very similar challenges at the moment, and we're seeing some interesting approaches again across the whole space. So before I start talking about strategy, I suppose I'll give you some reflections, and you can tell me whether you think I'm fair, or maybe you have your comments about the 3 most common mistakes I see in accountancy and tax advisor marketing. The first one is an inside-out view of the world, where practitioners and firms just push out information about their general expertise. You know, we're great at international tax, you know, we're great at, you know, sort charity provisions and so on. So this is our message, and we're pushing it out there. The second big challenge or mistake is treating all clients and prospects the same. So the message is going out, it's not tailored to particular groups or particular needs, which means that it's rather dull, generic material that doesn't really make an impact on anybody that receives and reads it. And then the third thing that happens to all people who earn their living by earning fees, we end up with quite a lot of ad hoc and sporadic tactical activity, because we all know that accountants and tax advisors would much rather do fee earning technical work rather than marketing and business development. But also there's often no strategy or plan either for the practice overall or for particular service teams like payroll or HR or other teams, or for individual practitioners. There are very few, in the smaller practices as well, very few marketing and sales processes to support the things you need to do to have effective marketing and to launch new services. And the third area is really around the lack of measurement. Now, you know, obviously accountants are very good at measuring the cash that they're spending, but the more important, more valuable resource is the amount of time that you're going to ask your accountants and tax advisors to spend on, you know, marketing activities, or, you know, writing material, you know, speaking on events. And both of those need to be taken into account when we're thinking about, you know, return on investment and results. So let's just think about what's going on here. And I think it's largely down to a confusion between marketing and selling. Whereas this is a 1930s economist talking here, and he wrote a great paper for all marketing people called Marketing Myopia. And he basically says, you know, selling is focusing on the seller, on what they want to push out there, whereas marketing is really focused on the idea of satisfying the needs of the customer. So this idea about these 2 different things, and going back to that inside out view rather than an outside in view. I had a discussion a short while ago with a group of managing partners of professional firms, and we kind of came up with a concise way to think about what is really great marketing. And the way we saw it was it identifies the particular client needs that exist at that point in time, and your hopefully innovative or pragmatic solutions for those needs. That it raises your profiles and positions you appropriately in the market, and generates interests, interactions, engagement and leads, and actually makes it easier for you to sell. So there we can see that we can get this great connection between marketing and making selling a bit easier. So I'm talking about strategy where most of us are focused on short-term tactical. So let's just have a quick think. Now, there are many models here. Let's focus on a really simple model of strategy, 3 stages. And this process we can use whether it's a strategy for your practice, or whether it's for a particular area of expertise or market you're serving, or for an individual. So the starting point has to be some analysis or a marketing audit, thinking about what's currently going on, and we look internally at the data we have around what clients we have, their attributes, how profitable they are, what services they're subscribed to, where they came from, and other things like that. And also the external environment, what are our competitors doing, what's the general trends out there, what's the mood, and again, combining analysis of both internal and external factors to hopefully identify the core challenge or the core issue or a key opportunity out there. The second thing is being clear about our vision and having some smart, some measurable and time-specific objectives, really being clear about what we want to achieve. And it's only when we have those 2 parts in place that we can make the right choice about what strategy and campaigns we need to put into action. I'm reminded here of that lovely quote from, I think it's in Alice in Wonderland, where she says to the Cheshire Cat at a crossroads, you know, which way do I go? And the cat says, well, where are you trying to get to? And he says, well, I don't really mind. And he said, well, it doesn't really matter which way you go. You need to know where you're trying to get to pick the right approach. Now, I was cognizant of a firm that I've known for a while here that's had a long-running strategy to dominate the engineering sector. And they spent 8 years investing in thought leadership work and in aligning with various engineering associations and finance sources aimed at engineering businesses. That's their long-term strategy, and they're very successful in it. So when they were looking at a short-term emergency campaign, they're obviously going to be looking at something that fits within that overall framework and their overall brand positioning, rather than ignoring that and moving on to something completely different. So just a couple more thoughts on strategy. Lots of different definitions. One thing is around competitive advantage. You know, there are lots of people in the same situation as us, lots of accounting practices putting out very similar messages. You know, what's going to give us an advantage? What's going to make us stand out? The second thing I say to people is to go up in the helicopter. We can get drowned in data and drowned in detail, but sometimes you need to kind of take a view of the overall landscape, the longer term horizon, and plot a course through that, rather than, you know, being surrounded by, you know, wooden trees. And the third thing is, you know, by definition in professional services, we like to be followers rather than leaders. So we need to be brave. We need to perhaps take some risks. We need to be creative in order to put something together in that campaign that, again, will drive us forward. So we've talked about strategy generally, and in terms of marketing strategy, this is a definition. And my apologies, dear marketers who are listening. You know, we can look at this in more detail. But one of my observations is often accountants and tax advisors will start at the bottom. They'll go straight into some sort of promotional activity, hoping for great results, and then are disappointed. Because really, you do need to go through these preliminary stages around, you know, understanding your market, the service, the price, the process, getting everybody in your organization engaged, frontline staff, people taking calls, people answering emails. I'd also make a point here that there's been quite a few conversations I've had at the moment with people around price. Accountants saying that their clients are either refusing to pay or can't pay, or requesting, you know, reductions in price, despite wanting more advice at the moment than, you know, probably ever before. So you might do something a bit proactive around that, where people are having challenges with pricing, obviously keeping the cash coming into your business yourselves, but having a think around that aspect in particular. Again, being a bit different here, some examples I've seen recently is a practice that looks after its charity space, knowing that they are facing a big shortfall in their fundraising, have hired a fundraising expert to do some webinars to deliver them some advice on digital fundraising, and then have some services on the back of that one to help. So again, just seeing some interesting changes around that. So just having a quick look again at a few of those points in a bit more detail. Setting some goals. Now, this is not just to measure your return on investment. It's also to give you some focus and to manage your expectations. Now, most people will use, you know, the wonderful 3 R's for their objectives and goals: revenue, reputation, and relationships. And hopefully you will also have profit in there as well. But you might be a bit more granular in a campaign and think about what cost per inquiry you're prepared to pay, what cost per client, bearing in mind the lifetime value of a client if it uses more than just a short-term emergency service, you know, or how many meetings or online interactions do you want with clients each week. If you want to go further granular, you might think about how much web traffic, how many calls, how many sign-ups for sorting out your database or for future newsletters. So that's some things to think about, getting your goals and your expectations in clarity. The second thing is around focusing on a particular segment or niche. Now, Tim will talk to you about personas later on, but we know that niches is probably one of the most effective methods of marketing for smaller practices. It puts you on an even playing field with the big firms, and you can also use digital marketing techniques very, very effectively to reach a specific niche. So again, some of the things I'm seeing at the moment is firms that focus on the hospitality sector, putting out some really neat financial modeling tools for their clients. I've seen some really down-to-earth and pragmatic advice by a firm for its catering clients. And I've seen some of those supporting high-earning sports people, some updates on their lifetime financial planning advice. Again, so some interesting different focuses on particular niches. So once we've got our segments and our focus on our niche sorted out, what's the insight or need? And we need some inspiration here to, again, think of something a bit different to stand your message out. Again, I saw a really early on excellent campaign where 10 immediate actions for directors to take under the situation. That was a very early campaign. I've seen some nice podcasts from a firm of accountants in how to thrive in retail when you've got no shop front. And I've seen some really nice stuff by another firm of accountants targeted very much at the requirements and needs of facilities management businesses. So again, very targeted focus. Once you've identified that insight or need, we need to do the articulation of and communication of that value proposition. What is it that you are going to deliver to your clients? And in this environment in particular, we are looking at providing some free advice and some free help, but obviously thinking about the paid for elements on the back of that. So I saw a nice campaign recently where a firm is offering membership of a rotating tech roundtable, talking about different themes for those businesses, publishing the highlights and sharing them for free, creating a little online community, but also having a number of paid for services that can be pursued if people want to do that. In that communication, we do need to make sure that we stand out from the crowd. The word differentiation is quite important, and you do need to be bold and creative for that. And we can do that a number of ways. There's a very nice campaign by a firm that concentrates on love or money, not just the financial aspects of running a small business at the moment, but the emotional impacts. And of course, emotions are going through all sorts of roller coasters at the moment. So engaging with clients around how they're feeling about running a business or their responsibility towards their staff or whatever else is a nice angle. You could use some humor, and I always remember there the Thomas the Tax Engine blog, and put some humor into your delivery. I've also seen some very pragmatic advice recently in terms of, easy help for preparing loan documentation by a firm. Or you could be completely counterintuitive. Everyone's focusing about businesses in distress at the moment. Maybe go for focusing on those clients that you have that are experiencing excessive demand and engaging with them on the growth of very fast upscaling, whether they're in tech or broadband or logistics sector at the moment. So I'm conscious of the time, I'm going to speak even faster. The marketing model at a simple level is around raising awareness, attracting people, getting them to consider you, and then converting them into clients and then developing the relationship. That's the overall journey. And we can see how marketing and selling should work together. So marketing will take some of the effort out of those initial 3 stages of getting people into contact with you, so you can concentrate your time using the same messages to convert them into paying clients and developing the relationship. So again, I'm not going to go through this in detail. I've given you step by step the questions you need to go through to put together a comm strategy. Tim's going to elaborate on some of this stuff later. You will also have links to documents that go through these stages in a bit more detail. But I suppose really the point that I wanted to make is, well, what does good look like in a short-term emergency campaign? So ultimately, you want to end up with something that looks something like this, whether you're working for a 4-week campaign or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, planning out the activity that needs to happen in terms of your preparation and your analysis, your profile raising, generating the interest, your events, obviously digital events at the moment, and also your conversion processes. So then you can align the different resources needed at different times and perhaps share the load across the team so that not one person is doing all of it. So I think that's my 15 minutes up, Tim. So I will hand back to you.
Let's see, let me get back. Thank you very much, Kim. That was excellent, and some interesting, inspiring examples of what accountancy firms are doing in the current market. Okay, so what works during lockdown while in a hurry? At a tactical level, you've decided who you're going to target and you've decided what your offering is going to be. Now, clearly the campaign needs to focus in, your tactics need to be elaborated and focus in on the need you've identified in the market and how you can serve it better than the competition. And you need to be thinking clearly about this for it to be able to come through in the tactics. As an example, better could mean all sorts of things. If you walk into a tender and you're up against a big 4 firm, the person you're meeting already has it in their mind, in the back of their head, that the big 4 firm is politically lower risk, has more resources and brings greater prestige. That's even before the big 4 firms walked through the door. They've got it into their head. So you need to be thinking about, well, what is it that's better that you're going to be offering that you can communicate through this? And a lot of firms just latch in on more partner time and great relationships. These are not better. They are better, but every firm you're competing against is going to be offering those. So think much more clearly, and this is very important as we come on to the tactics, about what it is that you're going to be offering, about your relevant offering, and through your strategy that is better. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to get it in, get the sort of language, the empathy, the understanding of your target? Well, this is where we come on to the first of the 3 Ps that I want to talk about, which is persona. But a word before we come on to this, which is what makes professional services marketing work. And it's not a secret. David Maister mentions it in his book from 27 years ago. For you who don't know him, he's the professional services marketing guru, primarily worked with law firms, but his lessons apply across other practice areas, professions as well. And he says in his book from 93, marketing works when it demonstrates, not when it asserts. And this is something that needs to come across all the tactics you'll be using, or whatever tactics you consider, whether it's any of those in those tactics cloud that's there, other ones, whatever it is, it needs to be demonstrating, not asserting. I can say every single one of those tactics I've seen work, and I've seen them fail. Even Twitter, I have seen work for some accountants. I wouldn't recommend it, but I've seen it work. But they work when they demonstrate. They don't work when they assert. So, how do you decide which of these tactics is going to work with your one when you are demonstrating your expertise, not asserting it? Well, it's very important, and very few firms have this, but it is very important to put the effort into making a persona. What is a persona? Well, this is the sort of archetype of the person in your segment that you are aiming at. It's all about understanding their problems, their ambitions, what help they need, what are the challenges they've got at the moment, what might be the language they use, where do they consume their media, what sort of advice, how do they want it, what do they want from you. Ultimately, without this sort of avatar, some people call it, you are unlikely to have the empathy to connect with them or really understand the best ways to approach them. So by way of an example, some businesses, particularly where I'm based in the Thames Valley, may well be looking to target tech companies. There's a lot of them around. There's a lot of them in other areas as too. But what sort of tech company founder would you be targeting? It could be a millennial who perhaps likes Twitter, reads TechCrunch, is building it to sell, and the first thing she does when she comes in is look at the SEO rankings for her business. Or maybe you're thinking more about boomers. It's their umpteenth business. They're creating their legacy. He reads the FT and he's more interested in the daily sales figures. I can say that whichever tactics and indeed language you use for this type of tech company owner will be very different to the way you would approach this person. And your key challenge is how to communicate strongly with as many of them as possible, but at the same time avoid the pitfall, which is trying to communicate blandly to all of them, so you end up missing every single one of them. So in the resources we'll be providing afterwards, there'll be more about personas, but there's an awful lot out there about creative personas. I strongly recommend it. It is one of the essential 3 Ps. The next P is the plan. Now, the plan is how you operationalize your strategy through the different elements using the sort of timetable that Kim was talking about. And your tactics will depend, particularly in a very short period of time, like the one we're talking about, from a combination of what works with your prospects, which we mentioned about through the persona, and where you are starting from. Now, your plan needs to be all about demonstrating the sorts of things that work well in that are advice, and indeed there has been a huge effort from the accountancy profession to provide advice to its clients, but it's now time to move on from the emergency that your clients have faced to thinking about how you tailor that advice, how you deliver that advice, what sort of advice is going to position you for the future, the near future. Case studies are all about demonstrating, not asserting. Insights, perhaps tools. Kim mentioned about not just one of these bland tools that you've bought in from somewhere that gives you the same sort of budget calculator that everyone else has, but something very much tailored to the needs of the segment you're going for. Some sort of free offer, Kim mentions some really good initiatives by other accountancy firms. And then once you've got sort of these, we move on to the third P, which is to have a process, and a plan and a process are not the same thing. Refine and repeat and repeat and repeat. Now, Kim mentioned some of the common professional services marketing fails. It's not just accountants and tax advisors. Legal professions and property professionals often encounter these as well. But when you start to have that plan and a process, and we'll move on to a process in a minute, it starts to overcome all of these sorts of ones. That following the sorts of steps Kim was talking about overcomes the Me Too marketing and the bland marketing. Having a plan and a process overcomes the staccato marketing of start, stop, start, stop. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of referrers in this. Everyone here will probably think, oh, we deal a lot with referrers, we're great with them. And actually, you probably are doing a lot with them, but actually those firms that have systematically looked into how they can squeeze more out of referrers have noticed a dramatic increase. There is a big problem with the lack of delegation. Again, if you, it all falls on the partner's busy, it all falls down. Again, the more you can systematize it through a process, the more delegation you get, the better results you achieve. And many of you may have joined this seminar thinking, well, this is all well and good, we'll just wait for Tim to recommend a really good tactic and we'll implement that. And this is endemic of the silver bullet belief out there in many professional firms, that all they need to do is do that magic press release or that wonderful social media post, and they're going to get amazing results. I'm afraid it's about process and time, not about silver bullet solutions from whoever sold you one, sold you a great idea a few moments ago, or from replicating what your competitors are doing. So I've got a little chart here. We'll send this through in the information, but really you need to be thinking about whether a tactic will work with your persona that you are talking about for your different segments. What time will it take you to make it work? For instance, you might decide that doing videos is a really good idea. And indeed, I've seen accountancy firms do videos. I've seen them do expensive videos. I've seen them do webcam in an office videos, both of which can work very well. But in the time available, is it appropriate for you? Is it just going to be too painful? Or quite frankly, are you itching to do it? You've got the passion and you'll make it work and it'll be a big success. So you need to think about, do you have it in you to make that tactic work? Then you need to think about, can you do it yourself within your own resources, whether through knowledge of it or through getting the knowledge quickly? And again, it's one of those things, if people have the time, the interest and the passion, they can, but quite frankly, most don't. So in which case, if you don't have the resources in-house, you need to either bite the bullet and outsource it, or you need to move on to a tactic that was, if you can't afford that, that's within your budget. Now, going back to what Kim was mentioned about people teaching everybody the same, when you're a professional firm, you will have noticed that when you get a recommendation, it's much easier to sell to this person. Or when you meet a client and it's much easier to upsell to this person. There is a good reason for this, and that is because you have already overcome the barrier, the biggest barrier, which is trust. And that's been overcome because either they worked with you, you've done a great job, they trust you, or because someone in your network knows that person, they trust that person, they've recommended you. Easy client to pick up. So you are in the circle of trust. Now, clearly, whatever segment you're going for, you want to go for these people who are in this segment, who are already in your circle of trust. Now, we'll move on to that, expanding that, because the more ones you can get into that, the easier it is to sell. The second bit, you then go on to getting more out of referrers and other contacts that you know well. And it's only finally that you then move on to targeting people don't know. Now, most marketing campaigns start with the people who are the toughest to sell to, which are the people in the third segment. Now, clearly you want to be building your reputation and indeed your contacts with these people, because it takes longer to sell to them. There may well be a lot of good opportunities there, but don't feel that marketing equals going for people you don't know. Actually, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit often right in people's faces without them seeing it. So on the first part, very much spend time going for these low-hanging fruit. They know you, they trust you, they can, even if they aren't going to buy from you, they can become your referral engine if you're clear, specific about what you're looking for. So this network, you've probably got some sort of mailing list, you've probably got some sort of network on LinkedIn, but make sure, go through it systematically. Has it got your clients, your past clients, people from past clients who've moved elsewhere, your referrers, your firm's alumni? All of these sorts of people are very powerful, and LinkedIn is a great tool for connecting with these people if you haven't spoken to them. But clearly don't just pop up and say, oh, by the way, I'd like to sell to you. Get on their radar before you make the sale. So the process, getting it right. And again, most processes work better over time rather than through timing. Yes, it's great to get a press release or a leaflet out there and hope everyone's in buying mode, and there are potentially, if you've got the right offer at this time, going to be those sorts of people. But actually, it's through repetition over time that marketing works, and to prevent you having to spend large amounts of time constantly creating new content and new material, recycling and delegation are key. That's not just pumping out the same old thing. People will quickly switch off with that, but it is about making the maximum use of the material you create, and indeed revisiting ideas in a number of different ways. Okay, so what would one of these marketing processes look like? Well, in my experience, a typical accountancy firm process would be create a web page, bung it on the newsletter, send a leaflet, wait for the phone to ring. Now, in the good times where you've been an established accounting firm, you've got a nice network and enough sort of leads will drip through the door over time through the large number of people, that may actually have kept you in a good living. I'm going to suggest that if you've got services you want to either launch or revamp, you need to up your game at the moment. So an example process, which would be either a process that you would apply systematically to the same contact, or indeed you might take the process and apply it systematically across different segments. So an example here would be send 5 emails, series of blogs, phone the people to invite them to a webinar you want them to attend, hold the webinar, reuse the material from the webinar across a range of across your website, newsletter, or whatever. Make sure attendees get 4 follow-up phone emails and a phone call, and perhaps also try and get people in for some sort of free consultation, which might be your end result, your end metric. Now, remembering all of these things need to demonstrate along the way rather than simply assert. So, sounds a lot of effort. Well, it is certainly some effort, but getting it done, again, you need to think about how to maximize the resources. Even in small accountancy firms, there are resources, and lead partners need to be focusing on the bits they do best, providing the insights, following up with qualified leads, not any old person who rings up, and think what I call presenting at scale. So doing this sort of thing, or writing a couple of really keynote articles, whatever it is that they're good at. Other accountants can get involved with helping with insights. Maybe they can be writing, maybe they can be proofing, maybe they can be researching. Maybe you can even get them involved if dealing with prospects who ring in that you don't think are that much use. You can use them as a triage process, so that if there's a nugget of gold in there, they spot it and can pass it on. Make full use of your marketing specialists to maximise partner time, whether it's advice, creative input, creative writing, and definitely the day-to-day management of the marketing tactics, unless you really enjoy getting your head around those. And for everybody, there needs to be reporting, reviewing and refining, treating it in a professional way, a management way, not a sort of amateurish, we'll do it when we've got time way. Okay, we will be taking questions. If you would like to send them through on the question box. While you are sending them through, I'd just like to say a few words about how we can help in this sort of time. So, it seems to us that there's a number of problems people will be having at the moment. First of all is creating a workable strategy quickly. Hopefully the sorts of things Kim has been talking about will give you a good idea about the sorts of things you need to discuss. But facilitation, creativity and these sorts of things, sometimes they aren't the core preserve, and sometimes outside input is facilitation is needed. Implementing the plan quickly is important as well. Dare I say it, where I've had dealings with professional firms, often they drag their feet over these sorts of things and there isn't the urgency that should be there. There's a problem if you've got several tactics of sourcing and managing multiple suppliers with sector knowledge. There's the problem of creating compelling, impactful content. Perhaps where these things are new to firms or there are a bit of nervousness about it, there is overcomplication, delay, and indeed preventable fails are not avoided. So we're going to be providing and launching in the near future, and we'll be contacting people after the webinar, an emergency marketing service for those firms that just want to get on with launching and want a team of professionals who can help them through it quickly to a high standard, overcoming the problems I mentioned earlier. Our service will be very much along the lines of follow the process, get good results. It will be delivered through a team of independent expert suppliers, either small agencies like Kelso Consulting or independent consultants such as Kim. And the outcome will be the key marketing elements delivered to a high standard. The strategy creation, the campaign plan and process, and the core content or core requirements of content, building up your network, promotion, booking meetings, and ultimately getting it all done quickly. So we'll be sending more details about that next week. Okay, questions. Thank you very much. Let's see. The first one, I think this one is a good one for you, Kim, not least because I've been talking for far too long. We've never had an overall marketing strategy. In fact, I can say from the pre-questionnaire many people completed, a lot of firms don't have either a marketing strategy or a sales process. So we have not got an overall marketing strategy. Can we still produce an effective campaign?
Okay, Tim, thank you for that. A number of times I go in to help firms with developing a particular service or helping with the short-term generation of work. and not surprisingly, there isn't an overall strategy. That means that you can run the two processes in parallel and look at the strategy for the practice overall while you're thinking around a strategy and a campaign idea to go forward. And in fact, if you even go through that process that I outlined quite in a kind of quick and dirty manner, doing the bare essentials, it's enough to give you a background framework and often reveals ideas around which segments or which services might be suitable for a new service or a short-term campaign. So, you know, obviously, ideally, we'd like something there, but if there's nothing there, then we can kind of co-create it as we look at the campaign, although it might take a slightly longer time and a bit more delving than if you were going straight into a campaign having a strategy already. But again, I think most often in smaller practices, there may not be a written strategy, but there will certainly be something in the heads of the partners or the directors around their focus on a particular group of clients or their particular benefits or the reasons that they are successful. And it's, you know, a question of just, you know, articulating that in a structured way to give a good foundation for the campaign. So absolutely, it's not a problem, and it's a very frequent situation that covers. Does that help, Tim?
Yeah. Do you have a follow-on question for that one? Send it through. If not, it sounded good to me. How? So next question we've got here is. I'll ask you for this. I think I've got a few bits I'd like to say, but how can I tell, Kim, if my marketing strategy is a good one before I implement it? There we go. That is pretty important.
Okay, well, I'll say a few words on this, and I know, Tim, that you will want to contribute here. I suppose it goes back to some of the parts of the process that I outlined. And I have a very kind of, I've got a 4-point plan for assessing a strategy and a 9-point plan. So my 4-point plan, and I'll try and make sure it's added into the resources, would be, you know, are we really clear about what we're trying to achieve here? Are the objectives realistic? And are they, you know, time specific? And so clear objectives. The second thing is that clear understanding of what's the market and what is the need and the service we're providing to meet that. So real clarity about the market and the services. Planning and execution, have a plan, but who's going to implement it? So those two need to happen together. That would be a good strategy where you've not just got a great plan, but you've got the resources or the ideas of how to execute it. And I guess the fourth part is thinking, you know, is it going to be effective? Are we going to be able to achieve what we want at the outset? And maybe think around risks or whether you might need to change tack or, you know, what you do in a different situation as you start to unfold your strategy. So that would be my short term, the 4 key parts to look at. You know, but in a more expanded version, I'd talk about whether it aligns with what you're trying to achieve overall in your business. I'd look around aspects of differentiation. So some of the other things that we talked about in terms of, you know, what does good look like when you go through the process. So that would be my kind of headline thoughts there.
Great. Now I've got a few different takes on that. Complementary. I would say the first thing you've got thinking about is this strategy differentiating ourselves? Because ultimately, if it isn't, then I think you need to go backwards and have one that does. So that's the first thing, is does it differentiate us? At a simple level, we've probably all come across long, complicated strategies. So I would suggest that your strategy one, at least at a headline level, needs to be something you can remember, and indeed the rest of your team can remember. In fact, it's even worth asking people what the strategy is and get them to write it down with no conferring, just to see if it actually, because if people can't remember and articulate it when they get into their day job, they're not going to live it or implement it because they can't remember what it is they're looking to achieve. Not the whole detailed document, clearly, but we say the headline summary. And there was one bit which always stuck with me, which I can't claim to originate. It was from an article in the Harvard Business Review about how do you tell a good strategy. And the person said, the professor of whatever it was, said that if your strategy is entirely logical based on the information available, entirely joining the dots with logic, it's probably exactly what your competitors are going to be doing as well, because they will have the same information and have drawn the same conclusions as well. So I think then you need to think, what is the creative, distinctive bit that is unique to us that other people aren't going to be doing? Because again, if you're doing a strategy that is entirely logical, but is being followed by a lot of other accountancy firms, you're going to get into, if you've heard the expression red ocean and blue ocean, the blue ocean you have to yourself and you've got lots of space. The red ocean is red with blood because everyone's fighting it out there. And most accountancy firms find themselves in the red ocean, and not only in the red ocean, but they find themselves in the red ocean with people with bigger knives. So those would be my thoughts. Okay, Kim, we have a question. I'm going to direct this one to you. Our database is woefully out of date. I can't believe someone is saying this, but someone, you may have come across this in the dim and distant past, Kim. Our database is woefully out of date. Can we still develop a fast campaign?
Okay. Well, actually, this isn't such a surprise, because apart from the really large and sophisticated practices, I don't think I've met many firms that have reached database nirvana, where their database is beautifully up to date and properly structured with all the right information. That's quite a rare scenario to be in. So take some comfort that you are not alone in having a not very good database. So what I would say to this is, firstly, while we have this strange time at the moment and people perhaps, you know, having a bit of time on their hands if they can't do quite as many of the things they would do normally, you know, break up that task and prioritize getting that database sorted out. That's the first thing, because it is quite important. And take an 80-20 approach in terms of thinking around, you know, which are the major clients and the major referrers and major contacts where we got to get the data right to begin with. Then my second thought would be, this would be a really good time to think about doing a campaign to clean up that database, to get your permissions, your sign-ups, insights into what your people in your database would like to receive information on. And you could do a short campaign with primarily that aim of getting the database sorted out. I think the third thing I would say is that, no, you are not, unable to do anything, because social media is there. If you have been diligent in connecting to your clients and contacts on LinkedIn, actually it's quite neat, because it means you can, reduce the need for all of the GDPR compliance pieces there when you've connected with people on LinkedIn. So you can happily post material there that people will see, and hopefully you can get engagement and start conversations and direct message people as a part of that. So you could run an entirely, social media campaign, and no doubt your connections on LinkedIn would be some overlap with those you might have on Twitter and or on Facebook if you're a local firm of accountants with a strong community presence. There's no reason why you couldn't run a campaign in those environments, even without your database. But all the way through these, I would stress that building up that database and your inquiries and logging them and gaining permission is something you should be thinking about in all the future marketing you're doing, short campaigns or not, because it is probably one of your most valuable marketing assets that you have. And I say, and it's, you know, we're seeing right now how important it is that you can communicate quickly and effectively with your existing clients. So no, it's not a barrier, but it is something that you should have some serious thought about. It's fixing that problem in the longer term, and get on with some campaigns on the social media front in the meantime.
My first job in professional services marketing 20-something years ago was BDO Bender Hamlin was updating its back database. They gave everyone those, remember those big daisy chain dot matrix printouts, and the marketing team, we were each assigned some partners, and we had to bring this huge bundle about this big of their contacts from dot matrix printout. We had to bring it into their office and sit in their office and sit there until they had amended it by pen, and then take it away with us and get it all entered up. So the problem never goes away. It's simply there as a perennial problem. But certainly that method works if you're struggling to get partners. Just sit in their office until they amend them. That worked well 27 years ago. It's a very boring job for me and the rest of the marketing team. Okay, great question.
Sorry, Tim, I was going to add there that it's kind of a rite of passage, isn't it, for all marketing people, that at some point in your career development you spent time getting that database sorted out. Happily, there are some really neat tools around that will scrape database information from emails and cards and other things, so you don't quite have to face the monotony of keying stuff in yourself. So have a look at those tools that will help you build your database a bit more quickly than typing it all in. Sorry, Tim, to interrupt.
Oh, good point there. Good point there. If only we'd had those available in 1990s London. Okay, our last question, as we are nearly at our hour. Jump in on this one, Kim, as well, but it says here, most of our work is generated by existing client recommendations. What do we do now? I think, first of all, I think you're actually in a fabulous position if your work is coming from client recommendations. It shows what great relationships and great work you are doing. And it's, I think, rather than saying, well, we get lots of work from our clients in the past, let's target loads of strangers. The thing is to think, we've got these really great relationships. How can we maximize those? How can we have conversations with these people? Perhaps you could look them up on LinkedIn, see who they know that you want to get an introduction to, and go to your clients. You could ask them for introductions. You can ask them for case studies. You could perhaps hold a virtual coffee meeting and get them to bring along their contacts, whatever. You can talk to them about what services they want for the future. You're in a very good position. Some people on this may well go to BNI. For those people who don't, I'm not a BNI member, but I have been to them. BNI is all about generating referrals. And one of the things that BNI uses, which works very well, is being very specific. So if I went to someone and said to them, oh, let me know if you've got any businesses that need tax advice. I mean, it's like, well, you know, how on earth is anyone going to, usefully generate a referral from that unless someone says, I need tax advice? But if you were to go to them and say, hi, do you know someone who's recently invested in perhaps a van or a machinery, and probably, in this environment they're looking to, they've got problems as well, because we can help get some capital allowance money for them, or whatever it is. If you focus in with a very specific type of person you're looking for, they're much more likely to connect it in their head. So make the most out of your clients, but don't go to them with bland things like, oh, do you know someone who needs an accountant? Go to them with some very specific areas you can help with that you think they will be able to recommend. And if you've looked them up on LinkedIn, you might even be able to prompt them with these people. Kim.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Tim, is, in this wonderful digital age, pick up the phone. Yeah, because, email and social media contact is great. But touching base with your clients, having the conversation, talking about what's going on with them, it's much easier to raise the comments, questions around who they're speaking to or who they might know or what other sorts of help they or their colleagues might know. So I'm conscious of the time. And the only other thing I would say is use this time as well to think about getting some case studies or some testimonials from those existing clients so that you can use them and get them out there a bit further than you might have done usually. That's all I'm going to say because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you very much for that answer, and also really big thank you for the excellent input on this, Kim, and for people who weren't able to keep up with us as we did talk rather quickly, you'll be getting a recording tomorrow. We'll also be sending you through in the very near future a feedback questionnaire. I'd be really grateful if you could spend 1 minute just to let us know how we did, how we could improve it, or indeed if there's areas that we should come back on after the webinar. You'll be getting a web page with additional resources that go into some of the areas we've been discussing much more deeply, and we'll be sending through in the very near future details of our emergency marketing service should it be of use to you. Thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Bye now.
Bye everybody.